The box arrived without a return address. It was waiting on Daniel Harth's doorstep when he came home. Rain soaking through his coat, the late evening sky the color of bruised flesh. He almost didn't notice it at first, just a shape against the peeling wood, too symmetrical to be mistaken for clutter. But something about it made him pause. It wasn't large. About the size of a thick book, wrapped not in cardboard but in dark, polished wood ebony. Perhaps its surface carved with faint geometric patterns that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking directly at them. Daniel frowned. He hadn't ordered anything. The air around the box felt wrong. Not cold exactly, but dense, as if the space it occupied resisted being shared. He hesitated longer than he should have. Then, with a muttered curse about paranoia and unpaid bills, he bent down and picked it up. It was heavier than expected. Inside his apartment, the silence wrapped around him like damp cloth. The building itself was old, one of those forgotten places where pipes groaned at odd hours and footsteps echoed from empty floors. Daniel had always liked it that way, quiet, isolated. Safe. He set the box on his kitchen table. For a long moment, he just stared at it. The carvings were clearer now under the yellow overhead light. Interlocking lines, spirals, sharp angles intersecting at impossible junctions. It wasn't decorative, it felt deliberate. Like instructions, or a warning. Daniel reached out and brushed his fingers across the surface. The wood was warm. He jerked his hand back. "That's not right," he murmured. "Wood didn't hold heat like that. Not unless no." There was no unless. He laughed nervously, the sound hollow in the empty room. "Just open it." There was no latch. No visible seam. No hinges. Yet when Daniel pressed his fingers along one edge, the box shifted not physically, but perceptually, like a trick of depth. The surface seemed to fold inward, revealing a thin line that hadn't been there a moment before. He froze. Okay, that's new. The rational part of his mind scrambled for explanations, clever craftsmanship, hidden mechanisms, optical illusions, anything but what it felt like. He pushed again. This time the box clicked. The sound wasn't mechanical. It was organic. Like something unlocking inside a living thing. The lid slid open. Inside was a puzzle at first glance. It resembled a cube, though not perfectly symmetrical. Its sides were composed of smaller interlocking segments, each etched with symbols similar to those on the box. But these symbols were sharper, deeper, almost bleeding into the material itself. Daniel leaned closer. The shapes didn't make sense. They weren't letters from any language he recognized. Not even stylized ones. They twisted in ways that made his eyes ache, angles that seemed both acute and impossibly wide at the same time, and yet they felt familiar. A strange, crawling recognition stirred in the back of his mind, like a half-forgotten dream. "I've seen this before," he whispered. But he hadn't. He was sure of that. He reached in and lifted the puzzle out. The moment his fingers touched it, a pulse ran through his hand, subtle but undeniable. Like a heartbeat. He dropped it. It hit the table with a dull, heavy thud. Silence followed. Then a faint sound. Daniel held his breath. There it was. Again. Tick. He looked around. The apartment was still. Tick. His eyes snapped back. To the puzzle, there wasn't a ticking like a clock. It was irregular. Natural. Tick. Tick, as if something inside the cube was moving. Daniel backed away from the table. "This is stupid," he muttered. "It's just a mechanical puzzle, some kind of art piece." But his voice lacked conviction. The puzzle shifted. He saw it. He was sure he saw it. One of the segments just slightly rotated on its own. The ticking stopped. The silence that followed was worse. He stood there for a long time, watching, waiting. Nothing happened. Eventually, the tension broke under the weight of his own disbelief. "I need sleep," he said, dragging a hand through his damp hair. "That's all this is." He grabbed the puzzle again carefully, this time, and turned it over in his hands. No seams. No visible mechanism. Just those impossible symbols. And yet, he felt an urge. Compulsion. To solve it. He shouldn't have. Somewhere deep inside. A voice whispered that truth with quiet certainty. But curiosity, no. Something stronger than curiosity overrode it. He placed his thumbs against two adjacent segments and twisted. The cube resisted. Then clicked. One section rotated. Perfectly. Effortlessly. If it had been waiting. The room changed. Daniel didn't notice it immediately. At first, It was subtle, the hum of the refrigerator faded, the distant sound of traffic outside, gone. The air grew thicker. The shadows deepened and the smell of faint, metallic scent crept into his nostrils, like rust or blood. He froze. Hello? The word sounded wrong, too loud, too close, as if the walls themselves were listening. He turned slowly. The apartment looked the same, it didn't feel the same, the corners of. The room seemed farther away, the ceiling higher, the shadows longer than they should. Beyond in those shadows something moved. Daniel blinked. Nothing there, just darkness.
Okay, that's enough. He set the puzzle back on the table. The moment he let go, tick, the sound returned.
Louder now. More insistent. Tick. Tick, tick. It wasn't coming from inside the cube anymore. It was everywhere. He stumbled back. Stop. The ticking didn't stop. It grew faster. Closer. Surrounding him. Tick, 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 tick. Stop. Silence. Instant. Absolute. Daniel stood there, chest heaving. The apartment was normal again. The hum of the refrigerator returned. Traffic outside. The faint drip of water from the kitchen sink. Everything normal. Stared at the puzzle that sat exactly where he'd left it. Innocent. Still, as if nothing had happened. Daniel didn't touch it again that night. He couldn't bring himself to. He covered it with a cloth and old dish towel and retreated to his bedroom. But sleep didn't come easily. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the symbols. Twisting. Shifting. Calling. Sometime past midnight. He woke up. He didn't know what had disturbed him. The room was dark. Silent. Tick. He sat upright. His heart slammed against his ribs. Tick. The sound was faint. Distant. But unmistakable. Was coming from the kitchen. He told himself not to move. Told himself it was just his imagination, that he was tired. Stressed. Losing it. But the sound persisted. Tick. Tick, slow, deliberate. Patient. Daniel swung his legs off the bed. The floor was cold beneath his feet. Too cold. He hesitated at the bedroom door. The darkness beyond felt deeper than it should have been. Thicker. Just check, he whispered. Just check, and it'll be nothing. He stepped into the hallway. The ticking grew louder, more rhythmic. More purposeful. The kitchen doorway loomed ahead. Black. Silent. Waiting. Daniel reached for the light switch. His fingers hovered over it. Then he stopped. Because the ticking had stopped, and in the silence that followed, something inside the kitchen breathed. Daniel did not touch the light switch. He stood frozen in the narrow hallway, one hand lifted toward the wall, listening so hard it hurt. The apartment had changed again. Not visibly, not in any way he could explain if someone had asked him in daylight, but in the oldest part of his brain. The part that had once warned creatures to flee from rustling grass or the sound of something bigger moving in the dark. Every nerve had begun to scream. There was someone in the kitchen. Someone. Something. A breath came again from the darkness ahead. Slow, wet, patient. It sounded too large for the room. As if a chest much broader than any human's was drawing air in through lungs lined with fluid. Daniel felt the tiny muscles in his shoulders lock so tightly it ached. "Who's there?" he asked, and his voice emerged thin and brittle. No answer, only the kitchen, black and still. Then, from somewhere low to the ground came a soft scraping sound. Wood against tile. A pause. Then another scrape. His eyes strained against the dark, trying to shape it into something ordinary. A rat, maybe. The old building had them in the walls. A pipe settling. A chair leg moving because the floor sloped. His mind offered one explanation after another, each weaker than the last. The metallic smell had returned. Stronger now. Thick enough to taste on the back of his tongue. Blood. Not fresh and hot, but old blood. Iron and rot. A scent like pennies clenched in a sweaty fist. Like a butcher's drain long after closing. Daniel's stomach turned. He forced himself to press the switch. The kitchen flooded with yellow light. Nothing stood there. The table, the sink, the peeling cabinets. The refrigerator with the rust creeping up its lower edge. A mug in the dish rack. A half loaf of bread. Rainwater glistening on the window above the sink. And on the kitchen table, beneath the dish towel, sat the shape of the puzzle, still. Harmless. His breath came out in a shudder. He almost laughed. Almost. Then he noticed the chair. He had left it tucked under the table. Now it stood pulled back several inches, angled slightly to one side, as though someone had been sitting there and had only just risen. Daniel stared at it. "No," he said softly. He crossed the kitchen in 3 quick steps and shoved the chair back into place harder than necessary. Its legs screeched across the tile with a raw, ugly sound. He tore the towel off the puzzle. The cube sat in the center of the table. One side was different now. He was certain of it. Before, the symbols had been disordered, a mesh of impossible lines. Now a portion of them aligned into something resembling a pattern, concentric squares around a circular pit of darkness no larger than a thumbnail. It wasn't a hole. It couldn't be. But his eyes kept reading it that way, as depth where there should have been surface. He leaned closer, at the center of that dark circle. Something gleamed wetly. Then the symbols shifted, just a flicker. A crawling rearrangement like muscles moving under skin. Daniel recoiled so violently. He slammed into the countertop behind him. The puzzle emitted a soft click, not random. Not mechanical, responsive, as if it had heard his fear and was pleased by it. He did not sleep again that night, by morning. He had convinced himself exhaustion was responsible for most of what had happened. Lack of rest could do strange things to the senses. Stress could magnify shadows, sharpen old anxieties into apparitions. He clung to those explanations while making coffee with trembling hands. Daylight helped, but not much. The box and the puzzle remained on the table, too solid to be dismissed as a dream. Morning sun spilling through the dirty kitchen window touched the carved wood, and the symbols seemed flatter in the light, less deep, less alive. Ordinary almost infuriated him. He wanted the thing to look evil. He wanted it to justify the terror it had stirred in him. Instead, it sat there like a collector's curiosity, elegant and inscrutable. Daniel circled it twice with his coffee mug in hand. His life until the box arrived had been defined by smallness and repetition. He restored antique books for a university archive downtown. He spent his days hunched over foxed pages and cracked spines, repairing paper with patient hands, breathing in dust and glue and age. His work suited him. Old things could be mended. Damage could be contained. Rot, if caught early, could be slowed. People were harder. He had learned that too well. On the shelf near the living room window stood a framed photograph face down. He had turned it that way months ago and never turned it back. He knew exactly what image waited beneath the glass. His younger sister Ellie, grinning with a chipped front tooth and one eyebrow half raised in mock suspicion. 22 forever. Dead 3 years. An overdose, the coroner had said. An accident, relatives had murmured. A tragedy. Daniel had never found a word that felt precise enough for what followed tragedy. The long vacancy. The guilt. The endless private trial in which memory cross-examined him nightly and always returned the same verdict. He had failed to see how far she was slipping until there was no one left to pull back. That was why he lived alone now. Why silence suited him. Why his apartment looked more temporary than inhabited. And perhaps that was why the puzzle disturbed him so deeply, because beneath the fear was something worse. Recognition, not of the object itself, but of the feeling it awakened. The sense that something terrible had already entered his life long before he realized the door had been opened. He should have thrown it out. By noon, he knew that. Knew it with a clear, practical certainty. But every time he approached the table, meaning to carry the box downstairs to the dumpster, a pressure built behind his eyes. His thoughts blurred. A low hum filled his ears like power lines in summer heat. His hand would hover over the puzzle, and another thought would slide in. Gentle and persuasive, not yet. He hated that thought because it did not feel like his own. By early afternoon, he compromised with himself. He wouldn't destroy it, not yet. He would take it to work, show it to someone more rational, more detached, someone who might identify the carvings, the craftsmanship. The type of wood. Someone was Miriam Vale. Miriam worked in special collections 2 floors above the restoration lab. She was in her mid-40s, sharp-featured, dryly funny, and one of the few people Daniel tolerated for longer than 10 consecutive minutes. She specialized in obscure manuscripts, folk iconography, and the kind of historical garbage no one else wanted to sort through. If the puzzle belonged to any known tradition, Miriam would have some clue. He wrapped the cube back in the dish towel and placed it carefully inside his satchel. The moment the cloth covered it, the room seemed to exhale. Daniel stood in the kitchen doorway for a second, feeling the apartment settle. Then he left. The city looked overcast and exhausted. Rainwater filled the gutters. Pedestrians moved with collars raised and faces drawn. Daniel kept one hand on the satchel at all times while riding the bus downtown, irrationally afraid someone might take the puzzle or that the bag might begin to move. On its own, didn't. But twice during the ride he thought he heard the ticking again, muffled beneath the engine's vibration. Donnie opened the satchel to check. The sound stopped. Miriam was in the archive reading room when he found her, bent over a folio with white gloves on and half-moon glasses low on her nose. Light from the tall windows made her look colorless and precise, as though she had been stored between acid-free sheets. She glanced up. "You look atrocious." "Good afternoon to you too." That was my good afternoon. She removed the gloves with 2 efficient snaps. "Did you sleep in a coffin? Barely slept at all?" Wonderful. You finally adopted the archivist lifestyle. Daniel set the satchel carefully on the table between them. "I need you to look at something." Miriam's eyes narrowed. That phrase has never once preceded anything pleasant. He unwrapped the puzzle for the first time since receiving it. He watched another person see it. Her expression changed almost at once, not fear, not yet, but concentration sharpened into something colder. She said after a moment, "That is deeply ugly, Dogly. How? In the way certain things are ugly because they're trying too hard to be meaningful." She leaned closer without touching it. "Where did you get this?" "It was left at my door." "No note?" "No." "Ex-lover?" "Vindictive colleague? Secret admirer with terrible taste?" "None that I know of." Miriam ignored that. "May I?" Daniel nodded. She turned the cube slowly in gloved hands, studying the symbols. The fluorescent lights above them buzzed softly. Somewhere beyond the reading room, a cart squeaked along tile. Normal sounds. Comforting sounds. Then Miriam stopped rotating the puzzle.
"What?"
Daniel asked. She did not answer immediately. "These marks," she said at last, "they're not familiar in a direct sense, but they resemble a few things. Apotropaic grids, binding diagrams, ritual labyrinth motifs, some Near Eastern pattern logic, some medieval occult nonsense, some folk protective designs. Except," she frowned, "except those traditions usually aim at closure, containment. This doesn't. What does it aim at?" She looked up at him over the tops of her glasses. "Entry." The word landed in him like a stone dropped down a well. Daniel tried to laugh and failed. "That's not funny. I'm not joking." Miriam set the cube down with unusual care. "Where exactly did you say this came from?" "My apartment doorstep." "Daniel." Her voice had lost its usual irony. "I know you don't believe in this kind of thing. I don't. No, you don't. Which is why you came to me looking half dead." She pulled the folio she'd been working on aside and reached for her laptop. "There was a collection I processed a few years back. Estate donation. Mostly private papers, fringe mysticism, devotional fragments, frauds by the dozen. But there was one reference." Her fingers moved across the keys. "Something about constructed thresholds. Devices meant not to summon exactly, but to align space. To make one place overlap another." Daniel stood very still. Miriam scanned the screen. The lines around her mouth deepened. "Do you hear that?" she asked. Daniel frowned. "Hear what?" She looked up slowly. The ticking had started. Very faint, very fast, from the table between them. Miriam's face drained of color. "I didn't move it," she said. "I know." The ticking accelerated. Tick, 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 tick. Several students at distant desks looked up, brows knitting, hearing some fragment of the sound, though perhaps not all of it. One frowned toward the ceiling as if assuming a fixture was malfunctioning. Miriam stepped back from the table. "Wrap it up," she said. Daniel didn't move. The symbols on the upper face of the cube were shifting again, lines drawing inward, curving, assembling themselves into a shape that resembled an eye if an eye had been designed by something that had only heard the concept described.
"Daniel."
He grabbed the dish towel and threw it over the puzzle. The ticking cut off. Instantly, silence spread outward like oil on water. The students returned to their work. Somewhere nearby, a printer resumed clattering. The fluorescent buzz became audible again. Miriam pulled off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. "Take it out of here," Daniel swallowed. "Miriam, now, I need to know what it is, and I need this building not to become the setting of a cautionary tale." She lowered her hand. For the first time since he had known her, she looked genuinely unsettled. Listen to me carefully. There are objects that gather stories around themselves because people are foolish and frightened. And then there are objects that become the source of those stories. This is one of the second kind. That's impossible, perhaps. She gestured sharply at the wrapped shape. Then let's call it impossible from somewhere else. Daniel stared at her. Miriam leaned in, lowering her voice. Do not keep turning it. Ice spread through his stomach. How did you know I turned it? She looked at him with tired anger. Because these things don't begin active. A pause, then quieter. And because the archive note mentioned stages. He left work early. Miriam printed 3 scanned pages from an old handwritten inventory and slipped them into his satchel without another word. Her only instruction was to read them somewhere public, not at home, and not near the puzzle if he could help it. He tried the public library first. Every seat felt too exposed. Every rustle nearby made him flinch. So he ended up in a diner near the bus station, the kind open all day and all night. With old chrome edging and booths patched with gray tape, the waitress poured coffee he barely tasted. Daniel unfolded the copied pages. They were from a private journal dated 1908, written by an amateur antiquarian named Amos Reddick. Most of the handwriting was cramped and pompous, but one passage had been underlined in Miriam's pen. The instrument is no mere diversion. Its motions are sequential apertures. With each correct transformation, the surrounding chamber grows less obedient to ordinary dimensions. Sounds alter first, then proportions. Then visitations began, though at the earliest degree they may be mistaken for peripheral defects of sight or the effects of fatigue. A coldness crept over Daniel's skin. He kept reading. At the 3rd configuration, one must never remain alone. At the 4th, reflective surfaces are to be covered. At the 5th, if the chamber has begun to breathe, it is already too late. He stopped. Below that, another line had been bracketed in Miriam's pen. There is no true solving of the device. Only invitation. Daniel folded the pages shut. The diner around him went on as normal.
Silverware clink.
A child somewhere laughed too shrilly. A cook shouted for more plates. The ordinary world moved, dense and oblivious. Around the edge of his terror, he pulled the satchel closer with his foot. The weight of the puzzle inside seemed greater than before. A thought came to him, then simple. Sane. Obvious. He could abandon it. Leave the satchel under the booth.
Walk out.
Never look back. He imagined doing exactly that. Then he imagined someone else finding it. Some teenager maybe. Some curious hand. Some apartment somewhere else, learning to breathe in the dark. His chest tightened. No. He couldn't leave it for someone else. So he took it home. Of course he did. That is how these stories always move forward. Not because the victim is stupid, but because by the time they understand danger, responsibility has been braided into. Night had fallen by the time he returned to the apartment. The hallway outside his door smelled of mildew and stale radiator heat. He stood for a while with his key against the lock, listening. Nothing. No movement. He opened the door. The apartment was dark, except for a strip of sodium-orange streetlight leaking through the living room blinds. He did not turn on the overhead immediately. He didn't know why. Perhaps some primitive instinct told him that visibility worked both ways. He stepped inside. The air was warmer than it should have been. Humid. As if the windows had been sealed for weeks. He locked the door and turned on the lamp by the couch. Its light revealed the room in pieces. Bookshelf, coffee table, sofa, the face-down photograph, the narrow hallway to the bedroom. Everything in place. Almost everything. Daniel's gaze stopped at the far wall. The mirror and entryway, an old oval thing left by a previous tenant, had been turned to face the wall. He had not done that. His breath shortened. Slowly. He set the satchel down. Miriam said not to be alone, he whispered, with a humorless edge creeping into his voice. That's helpful. Very practical. He approached the mirror. Its brass chain swayed slightly, as though it had only just been moved. The pulse started hammering in his throat. Do not touch it. Some part of him thought. He touched it anyway and rotated the mirror back toward the room. For a second he saw only himself. Pale face, dark hair damp from mist, eyes ringed with sleepless purple. Then the reflection behind him smiled. Daniel spun around so hard his shoulder clipped. The wall. Nothing there. The living room stood empty. He turned back to the mirror. Now it reflected only the room, and Daniel rigid and white, one hand clutching the wall hard enough to hurt.
No.
He whispered.
No.
From the satchel on the floor came a soft, deliberate click. Then another. He looked down. The bag twitched, just once. As if something inside had adjusted its position, Daniel backed away from it. The apartment gave a low, almost inaudible groan, not from the pipes, not from the settling frame, not from the walls. Themselves, a long exhalation through plaster and timber, the pages Miriam had given him. Flashed through his mind, if the chamber has begun to breathe. He did not finish the sentence in his head. The lamp flickered, once, twice, then steadied. The room seemed subtly larger. Not enough to see exactly, but enough to feel. The far corners withdrew like cautious animals. The hallway to the bedroom looked longer than the apartment could physically allow. Its darkness pooled deeper than before. And there, at the mouth of that hallway, stood a figure. Daniel did not hear it arrive. It was simply there, tall enough that its head nearly brushed the ceiling. Thin in the wrong places and swollen in others, as though its body had been assembled from guesses about human anatomy. Its skin, if it was skin, looked stretched and damp, the color of paper left too long in dirty water. Its arms hung too low. The fingers were jointed incorrectly, folding inward and outward at contradictory angles. Where its face should have been, there was only a smooth gray surface marked by faint shifting lines, like the symbols on the puzzle trying to arrange themselves into features and failing. Daniel could not move. The figure tilted its head. A smell rolled off it. Wet wood, open earth, rust, and something sweet underneath. The cloying sweetness of decay hidden beneath perfume. The lamp dimmed. The figure took one step forward. There was no sound when its foot touched the floor. No weight, no impact. Just the sight of movement. And with it, a pressure in Daniel's ears so fierce he thought his skull might split. He tried to scream. What came out was a strangled gasp. The figure lifted one hand. Its fingers open like the petals of a rotten flower. Inside its palm was an eye not embedded in flesh. Not natural. It sat where the center of the hand should have been, lidless and glossy, staring straight at him. Daniel lurched backward and hit the side table. A lamp cord tore loose, something ceramic shattered on the floor. The figure's head twitched sharply at the sound, then turned toward the fallen pieces with abrupt animal curiosity. That tiny shift broke the paralysis. Daniel ran. He didn't decide to. His body did it for him, hurling him toward the front door with blind, graceless panic. He fumbled the lock once, twice, every finger numb and useless. Behind him. The room remained silent, too silent. He got the door open and stumbled into the hall. The hallway lights outside buzzed overhead. Painfully bright. He turned instantly back toward the apartment. The figure now stood just inside the doorway, not crossing the threshold, waiting. The eye in its palm remained open. Even from several feet away, Daniel could see the shifting lines across its blank face. Symbols sliding into place and dissolving before they formed. The thing leaned slightly, as if sniffing him. Then very slowly it raised one long finger and pointed past him into the apartment, toward the satchel on the floor. The meaning came to him with hideous clarity. It wasn't here for him. Yet. It was here because of the puzzle, and it would keep coming as long as he kept opening the way. Creature drew one finger across the featureless space where a mouth should have been. A gesture almost playful, almost intimate. Then the apartment door swung shut by itself. Daniel stood in the hallway outside, shaking so violently his teeth knocked together. Behind the door, from deep within the rooms beyond, the ticking began again. Daniel did not go back inside, not immediately. He stood in the hallway for what could have been minutes or hours. Time had lost its structure, stretched thin and elastic, his back pressed against the peeling wallpaper, staring at the closed door of his apartment as though it might breathe open again. The ticking continued on the other side, faint, persistent, like something counting down. He needed to think, but thinking required stillness, and stillness had become unbearable. So he moved down the hallway, past the dim stairwell light, down one flight, then another, until the sounds of his own footsteps became too loud, too real, grounding him just enough to form a single, desperate line of logic. This didn't start until I turned it. The puzzle, the configurations. The journal. Stages. He leaned over the railing, gripping it so tightly his knuckles burned. How many times, he whispered to himself. Once, only once. He had turned one segment and already breathing walls. The mirror. The thing, dot. His stomach dropped. At the third configuration, one must never remain alone, dot. He was still at the first, or worse, somewhere between first and second, and already the apartment was changing. Already something had come through. A soft sound echoed from above, not the ticking, something heavier. The slow drag across the floor. Daniel's head snapped upward. The sound came from his apartment. From inside. Something moving. Something exploring. He backed down another step, then another. But he stopped. Because a thought hit him harder than fear. Still in there. The puzzle, the device. The source. If he abandoned it, it wouldn't stop. It would continue. Grow. Wait. And eventually it wouldn't need the puzzle anymore. No, he said aloud, the words shaking but real.
No.
I end this.
The decision didn't feel brave. It felt like stepping into something inevitable. Like walking into deep water, knowing the ground would vanish beneath him. He climbed back up. Each step heavier than the last. Seemed longer now. The door to his apartment farther away, and the ticking louder. Faster. Hungry. He stopped in front of the door. His hand hovered over the knob. His reflection stared back at him in the thin strip of brass, warped, elongated, unfamiliar. Don't think, he whispered. Just move. He opened the door. The apartment had changed, not subtly. Not this time. The walls curved inward slightly, as though the space had softened and begun to sag. The ceiling stretched higher than it should have been, vanishing into a dim, uncertain shadow. The furniture was still there, but displaced, misaligned, like pieces of a memory assembled incorrectly. The air was thick. Wet each breath, dragged. And the sound not just ticking anymore. Layered beneath it was something else. Rhythmic pulse. A breath. Daniel stepped inside. The door closed behind him with a soft final click. The satchel lay in the center of the living room floor. And zipped. The dish towel, partially pulled aside, the puzzle was exposed. It was no longer still. Its segments moved slowly, deliberately, rotating in small increments without touch. The symbols across its surface writhed not randomly, but with intention, aligning into patterns that hurt to look at too long. The air around it, distorted. Like heat rising from asphalt. Daniel forced himself forward. Each step felt resisted, as if the room pushed back against him. The floor dipped slightly beneath his feet, not physically, but perceptually, like walking across something unstable. Stop, he said. Not to himself. To it. The puzzle clicked. Louder than before, and from the hallway the figure emerged again. Unfolded into the room. That was the only word for it. Not walking. Stepping. Folding. Limbs extending from angles that did not exist moments before. Its body lengthening, joints reconfiguring as if adapting to the space. It was larger now. Much larger. Its head brushed the ceiling, and the ceiling gave way, stretching upward like soft fabric to accommodate it. Daniel didn't look at its face. He couldn't. But he saw the hand, the eye in the palm. Open. Watching. You don't belong here, Daniel said. Though the words felt useless the moment they left him. The figure tilted its head. Again, then it pointed. Not at the puzzle. At him. The air compressed. A pressure slammed into Daniel's skull, forcing him to his knees. A sound flooded his ears, not external, not audible in the normal sense, but inside his head. Whispers. Hundreds. Thousands. Layered. Overlapping. Speaking in no language, in every language at once. Images followed. Not seen with eyes. Forced into him. A room not his own. Walls bending inward. People sitting around something on a table. The cube. Hands turning it. One by one. Faster. Faster. Until the walls peeled open like skin. Daniel screamed. The visions didn't stop. Another room. Older. Candlelit. A man hunched over a desk, scribbling frantically. Symbols. The same symbols. He looks up, and something stands behind him. Darkness swallowing entire spaces. Doors opening into wrong places. Figures stepping through. Waiting. Watching. Daniel clawed at his own head. Stop! The pressure snapped. The silence that followed was deafening. He gasped. Collapsing forward onto his hands, the puzzle clicked again. He looked up. The cube had shifted further. More aligned now. More open. Impossible central darkness. The hole that wasn't a hole had grown larger. Deeper. Something moved inside it. Daniel staggered to his feet. No more, he rasped. The figure advanced. Closer now. Too close. Its presence bent the space around it, warping distance, making it impossible to judge how far away it truly was. Its hand lifted again. The eye widened. Daniel lunged for the puzzle. The moment his fingers touched it, the world broke. Not metaphorically. Not emotionally. Visibly. The room split along invisible seams. Walls folding inward and outward simultaneously. The floor tilting at impossible angles. The ceiling collapsing and stretching in the same instant, and beyond those fractures something else. Not darkness. Not emptiness. Depth. Endless. Layered. Alive. Daniel saw shapes moving in that depth. Vast. Slow. Watching. The puzzle pulsed in his hands. Alive. Hungry. Turn it. The thought was not his. Complete it. The pressure returned. Stronger. Demanding. He understood. Logically. But with a certainty that cut deeper than thought. This thing wasn't opening a door. Building a bridge. Piece by piece. Turn by turn. And he was standing at the center of it. The figure loomed over him now. Its faceless head lowered. The lines across its surface shifted, aligning. Becoming clearer. Almost forming a face. Not human. But close enough to be worse. Daniel screamed and twisted the cube. Click. The effect was immediate. Violent. The space around him convulsed. The fractures widened. The depth beyond surged closer. The shapes within it stirred awake. The figure reacted. Upright. Limbs recoiling. As if something had gone wrong. The eye in its palm contracted sharply. Daniel stared at the cube. Another section had aligned. Another step. Another opening. No, he whispered. He understood now what the journal meant. There was no solving this. Only progression. Only deeper. Accessed, and each move brought them closer. The whispers returned. Louder. Closer. Not around him, inside him. One more. Hands shook. His mind screamed at him to stop. But something else, something deeper pulled. The figure lunged. Daniel turned the cube again. Click. Everything went silent. Quiet. Sound. Movement. Time. All of it. For a single, endless moment there was nothing. Then something inhaled. Not the apartment. Not the figure. Not Daniel. Something vast. Something beyond. Something that had just been given access. The world snapped back. Daniel lay on the floor. Almost normal again. Walls straight. Ceiling intact. Furniture in place. The figure was gone. The puzzle sat beside him. Still. Closed as if nothing had happened. Daniel didn't move. Was deep in the silence beneath. Everything he could still hear it. Not ticking. Not breathing. Waiting. Daniel lay on the floor long after the world stitched itself back together. He didn't trust the silence. Anymore. Silence had become a mask. Something stretched thin over movement, over breath, over things waiting just beyond perception. His body felt hollow, as if something inside him had been scooped out and replaced with cold air. Eventually, he moved. Slowly. Carefully. Like a man learning how to exist again. The apartment looked normal. The walls were straight. The ceiling solid. The furniture where it should be. Even the mirror hung properly now. Nothing moved in it except his own reflection. But the feeling remained. That pressure. That awareness. He turned his head. The puzzle sat beside him. Closed. Silent. Harmless.
No, Daniel whispered.
You're not done. He pushed himself up and backed away from it. Every instinct screamed at him to leave it alone. To run. To abandon everything and never return. Something had changed. Not just the room. Not just the world. Him. He could feel it. Now. Faint. Died somewhere deep inside his mind. Trailing outward into something vast and unseen. At the other end something was holding. Watching. Daniel staggered into the kitchen. His hands shook as he gripped the edge of the counter.
Think, he muttered.
Think. The journal, the stages, the warning. There is no true solving of the device. Only invitation. He had turned it twice. Maybe 3 times. He didn't know anymore. Time had blurred during the fracture. But he knew one thing. It wasn't finished, and that meant it wasn't too late. Or maybe that was the lie it wanted him to believe. Daniel laughed weakly. That's how it gets you, isn't it? Hope, responsibility, the need to fix what you've already broken. His gaze drifted to the living room. To the puzzle. It sat exactly where he'd left it. Waiting. The thought came again. Clearer now. Stronger. Finish it. Daniel squeezed his eyes shut.
No.
You've already begun. His breath hitched. That wasn't his thought. You opened the first door. His hands clenched into fists.
Shut up!
You cannot leave it incomplete. The voice wasn't sound. It was placement inserted directly into his awareness. Incomplete things linger. Chest tightened. Ellie's face flashed in his mind. His sister. Her laugh. The unanswered calls. The things left unsaid. The unfinished. Daniel staggered backward. No. Don't you understand now? The puzzle clicked on its own. Daniel's eyes snapped open. The cube had shifted. Another section aligned. I didn't touch it, he whispered. You don't need to anymore. The room dimmed. Not from the lights, from something else. The air thickened again. And the mirror. Daniel turned slowly. His reflection stood there. But it wasn't mirroring him. It was still. Calm. Smiling. Daniel stepped back. The reflection didn't move. You're not real, he said. The reflection tilted its head, then it raised its hand, its palm faced outward, and in the center of Eton. I opened. Daniel screamed and stumbled away. The mirror rippled. Not shattered. Not broken. Opened. The surface stretched like liquid. And something behind it shifted. Something vast. Something patient. And then the reflection stepped forward. Out of the mirror, it was Daniel. Exactly. Same face. Same body. Except for the eyes. They were wrong. Too deep. Too aware. You shouldn't have started, it said. Its voice was Daniel's. But layered, echoing. I can still stop it, Daniel said, though he didn't believe it anymore. The other Daniel smiled wider. No, it said softly. You are stopping it. It gestured toward the puzzle. Daniel turned. The cube was no longer on the floor. It was in his hands. He didn't remember picking it up. His fingers were already positioned. Ready. No, he gasped, trying to drop it. His hands didn't respond. You wanted this, the other Daniel said gently. To finish something. I didn't. You did. The voice softened. Became familiar. Just like with her. Daniel froze. The room seemed to shrink around him. You don't get to leave things broken anymore, the other Daniel whispered. The puzzle. His fingers moved. Against his will, turning. Click. The world held its breath. Mirror behind the other Daniel widened. Expanding. Deepening. And beyond it everything. Darkness. Not space. Something else. Endless. Layered. Watching. Daniel's vision blurred. Please, he whispered. It's already done. The puzzle shifted one final time. Click. Silence. Absolute. The connection inside Daniel snapped. Then vanished. The pressure disappeared. The room returned. Normal. The mirror solid. The light steady. Still. Daniel dropped the cube. It hit the floor with a dull thud. Nothing happened. He waited. Seconds passed. Then minutes. No ticking. No breathing. No movement. It was over. Daniel let out a broken laugh, covering his face. It's over, he whispered. And for the first time since the box arrived, he believed it. 3 days later, the apartment was empty. The landlord had found it that way. Door unlocked. Lights off. No signs of struggle. No note. No tenant. Just a small wooden box sitting neatly on the kitchen table. It inside it puzzle. Perfectly solved. Every segment aligned. Every symbol complete. Its center a dark circle. Not carved. Not painted. But opened. It. Something moving inside it. Watching. Waiting. Later that evening, a woman moved into the apartment across the hall. She noticed the box immediately. No label. No owner. Just sitting there. Waiting. She hesitated. Just for a moment. Then she picked it up.